Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today here on Prenatal Alliance interview series. Today, we have with us from India, Yukta Mukhi. She's a student of the Siddha Yoga Sadhana, and she has won the Miss World crown for India in 1999. She's also a mother and initiated into ancient wisdoms. Her focus is now on natural and sustainable endeavors for children and families. She's also a life coach for sustainability in chemical-free and earth-friendly modern urban living. And she's also a member of Prenatal Alliance organization. Yukta, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's completely my pleasure and honor, and thank you for having me. And it's been a while since we finally could be able to do this.
Yeah, I'm so happy that we are finally together and we can talk because you have so much wisdom. You have delivered so many good insights into our organization and how we should, deal with the things that are coming into the world. So I'm so happy that we are finally together and we can, spread your message more into the world. Today, we are going to talk about women's health and prenatal education. That's going to be our main topic. So let's start with what we were talking about before, about the menstrual cycles and the practices that have been the tradition in India. So what do you want to tell us about that?
Susan, to begin with, I think it's not just for India, but from what I have understood, it may have also been part of many other indigenous cultures, because I always believe that wisdom is wisdom, and it's not something that may be restricted only to one community or one society or one, cultural civilization. It could be that because of the way that the history of the world has shaped up, because of the colonization and because of so many factors of migration, that sometimes certain practices may be lost for a while to a certain region, but the truth always prevails, as we say. And what is true for my body is true for your body as well. If we didn't understand each other's language, but the fact that when women used to live together, they would menstruate together is a universally known truth. Even today, I hear women, they say we're working in the same office, or maybe women who are co-inhabiting in the same household usually tend to have a menstrual cycle very close to each other. So there's some science which has not been brought, very how can we say, in a very simplified language to the younger generation. And therefore, there seems to be this disconnect between what were very well regarded and protected and preserved ancient practices compared to where modern science seems to be misleading the younger generation. And I'm not saying this to discount modern science completely. There are areas where it has really helped women to be saved, in situations where the intervention is required in an emergency. But that should not even arise if we were to practice on a daily basis healthy rhythms and routines, which are rooted in the cosmic cycles with nature, when we go with nature. So I think one of the few things that I want to share with women and, even with men and younger girls who are listening is something that I myself was not educated when I started menstruating as a young woman, but has been introduced to me through the Ayurveda practitioner, the doctor who has really not only initiated me, but also really educated me on how to be able to understand your own body. So what is primarily, one of the primary practices is menstrual seclusion, which means when a woman starts bleeding, she immediately must isolate herself, not because she's untouchable or impure, but mostly because she requires that period of rest.
Yeah.
And when we force her to break away from all her daily duties, whether it's taking care of the children, whether it's cooking, whether it's cleaning, whether it's going to work, whatever may be her daily livelihood, it's important for her to then completely be with herself and nurture herself in a way where she's completely connected with her womb. And I think in my experience, had I been given this much sooner, I may not have had the disconnect with my body. I may have understood how much power my body has to heal in itself. The ability to have the natural immunity would have been much more stronger. I would have had much more resilience growing up. So I'm going to weave everything with my own experiences and also from my own spiritual reflections. And when I say spiritual reflections, does not mean it's the law for everyone. It's what I have come to understand. And I'm sure that when people hear this, they may also recognize and sort of, really acknowledge it. So I think the first thing that we're talking about seclusion is also because woman tends to lose a lot of her energy. If a man was to badly injure himself, or if a child were to unfortunately be in an accident, we would not be asking them to go to school or to work if they were having a bleeding arm or a finger or something. So why is it that women are expected to perform just like men? And why has this whole feminism of equality and trying to be on par with men and not being considerate towards the biological requirement of a woman's body? This is how nature has ordained for us to be. Now, having said that seclusion is required for rest, having said that seclusion is required for the fact that we want to be connected with our wombs and our bodies in a much more deeper way, we now come to the next aspect, which is requiring for us to look very closely at what kind of food do we eat. So our menstrual rhythm and our bleeding is really more of a cleansing process. We know that when we've not conceived a baby, the body is releasing an egg. We also know from modern science that this egg which we are releasing was in my ovaries from the time that I was a fetus in my mother's womb. And my mother's womb had me as an egg when she was a fetus in my grandmother's womb, which means on my DNA, every experience that my grandmothers have gone through in the maternal lineage is imprinted. And I think we call it the mitochondrial DNA, which is continued through the line of the daughters from mother to daughter. And I think somewhere it breaks down between mother and son. It kind of does not continue, which means we're also expressing through those DNA patterns any kind of trauma or any kind of past life memories, or maybe gifts from our ancestors, which could be things when people say, oh, she does that just like her grandmother. Oh, she has eyes just like her grandmother. Or she is creative in cooking, or she's such a great gardener. And we always say these things, but we don't realize that there is a very deep scientific and spiritual aspect to it. So when I'm saying we're looking at coming back to the second aspect of menstruation is what kind of food do we eat? It's also very important to recognize we're not just saying eat healthy, be inorganic. We're not saying, eat vegetarian. We're saying, why are we not putting out the question to ourselves as women? How do I eat through the month that then reflects during my menstrual health as either premenstrual cramps, pain, excessive bleeding, irregular bleeding, and so on and so forth? There are so many different issues that women go through. Our great-grandmothers didn't have half of these problems, whether it was, you hear so much about young girls now having PCOD, PCOS, fibroids, cysts, and I feel terrible that we're just looking only in one direction, which is to surgically intervene and find a way to just get rid of the problem and not really look at the root cause of the problem. So we have to have a holistic view about how we're eating food through the month, and then what kind of food are we required to abstain from during the 3-4 days that we bleed. And why is it such a great idea to not have tea, coffee, chocolates, ice creams, things that are not natural? These are processed foods. And a lot of women may say, oh, but I feel so low in energy and this is my comfort food, and shouldn't I not be taking care of myself in the way that gives me a lot of enjoyment or pleasure? Yes, maybe so, but surely not on the days when you're menstruating. And there's enough deeper science that we can go to. Maybe we can have a separate podcast or a discussion on how it is viewed from the Ayurvedic lens.
Mhm.
It's a wonderful, while the listeners are at it, and if there are some women who are really curious or want to know and go deeper into it, there is an Indian lady who's done more than almost 2 decades of research on this subject, where she's gone and found out from rural women in India what were the practices of the ancient ancestors and from the ancient times, and why have they benefited the health of the menstruation period for the women in India, to the extent that women in India are able to then deal with those issues with very natural and simple remedies. So her name is Sinu Joseph.
Mhm.
Just looked up on YouTube, there's plenty of talks, and she speaks
Yeah,
in English.
definitely, and we can also put a link here on the description here of our audio. Mhm.
Great. Yeah, for sure. And she's written a book. There's a course that she offers online. It makes perfect sense. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because she explains very beautifully the correlation between how modern science is corrupting these practices, and the whole colonized mindset is taking us away and disconnecting us from our wombs and bodies, and somehow making women feel very ashamed. Why do you need to take a work leave? I personally believe it should become a law for globally for women that, you're required to rest, whether you want it or not. You're required to rest and take the 3 or 5 days of leave from work, from duties at home. Men need to step up, children need to step up and make sure that they're contributing. So there's a lot that, that society had as an interwoven, interdependent system in place, which was very healthy and nurturing for the health of women. And the reason I'm mentioning all this is because Sinu Joseph also in her talks very explicitly explains how women who have been able to put these practices into place then have better health when they go into menopause.
Mhm.
And they don't have half of the issues like osteoporosis or any other weaknesses in their old age. And the only way that they've been able to manage that physical fitness is because they've taken the rest and managed their food and food cycles and their rhythms in order with the menstrual cycle. So the reason,
Yukta, you're talking about this, and which I find fascinating. I wish you could have just some tips to give to our audience in terms of Ayurveda. What could be more healthy on the times that women are bleeding. But another thing that comes to my mind is I did some research on this. That some women, they interrupt their cycles, their menstrual
yes,
cycles, because they take the pill, and there are lots of testimonies of women on how that affected their health, but not only in terms of physically, but also mentally, emotionally, and what happened when they restarted their menstrual cycles again. I don't know if you were thinking about talking about this. It was just something that popped up to my mind, because this is so important, what you're talking about to the health.
extremely vital. And I'm so glad that you brought up the question about the pills as well, because trying to break or stop our natural rhythms is not only dishonoring to our bodies, but as you very clearly pointed out, these women who've gone through it have then come back and reported how badly it's affected their mental and emotional health as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's important, and that's the reason it as a complete life cycle. How do we prepare our young girls? How do we celebrate when they first start bleeding? Do we want to have a ritual around it where we're welcoming them into this process? It's almost like a spiritual initiation. And I did not have it, but I believe that in the south of India, they've always had a huge, massive celebration, almost wedding-like, when a young girl gets into puberty. It's almost as if they want to declare it, by blowing trumpets, that she's now ready for not only making babies and of marriageable age, but also the fact that she is now into her womanhood, which means she's also maturing into the responsibility of the role that she's going to play in society.
Yeah, and it's a totally different aspect from the East and the West and the traditions of India, because there is a celebration around it. I know in Brazil they also do it, but
Yes.
in a lot of countries it's like a burden. When the woman has it, it has this charge put on her shoulders, like, oh, it's horrible. Now you're masturbating. Oh, right.
Yeah.
And it should be a celebration. It's a transformation in a woman's life, but it's also giving her the power to conceive.
Absolutely. And that is the reason that when the celebration happens, when she enters puberty, is almost like it's almost like an imprinting, or it's all like a programming in society where we say this is a positive thing. And when women are welcomed and young girls are received with that level of happiness and cheer and laughter and joy around it, that's the cultural shift that we want to make, not only for the East, for the West, but also in the East, where here in India, even though I'm speaking to you about indigenous wisdoms and ancestral traditions, but the fact is that we have been colonized for, about almost 1,000 years, to the extent where we could say we could have lost our values and our wisdoms, but fortunately we've somehow held on to it. The fact is, in cities, in modern India, in the educated younger generation, we stand along with the West, where a lot of women hate their bodies and hate the fact that they have to bleed every month. Why do we have to even bleed? I mean, it's such a horrible thing that, So the whole reason that I'm bringing about this importance, that when we celebrate it, and as you and I know, and a lot of people in the whole field of prenatal education, or anybody who's a gynec, or anybody who's into the whole scientific field, would know that there is the hippocampus in the brain. And this is the place where we store our most intimate and our most ancient memories. It's almost like the limbic system of the body. And the fact that when we have young girls celebrate being into a woman, bringing them into their own womanhood through the menstrual cycles, is imprinted on the hippocampus, so that every time she's bleeding, she looks forward to it. She's excited about it. She celebrates it every month. She's more and more in harmony with nature. She's more in tune with her needs. She's more in tune with her sensuality, with the body, with the, just the feminine aspect of saying, hey, I'm going through a process, and how wonderful is it to be able to gift myself, all the needs that I must honor during this time, in order for me to be a more contributing person in my household, in my work area, to myself as well, not only just through the month, not only just through the year, but overall for my entire lifetime. This is a way of me protecting my health. So the more that we stand up as women and we say, I'm not going to work, I refuse to work because my body says I need rest, and this is how nature has ordained it for me, is extremely vital for us. It's almost like saying, when we take the pill, which is a question that you asked me, it's almost like saying to my body, hey, I don't want to recognize what the pineal gland is instructed to the pituitary. I don't want these instructions going in a natural, organic way to my endocrine system. And I don't want the endometrial lining in my womb to be discharged in a natural way. And I don't want to so this is all scientific. Fact that we're trying to block, which means we're trying to block our energy, it's going to back up. And when it backs up, we already know the side effects of not only taking the drugs, but we know that the side effects of repressing our emotions is then going to come up as that whole emotional charge, which is what you were speaking about. Because our hormones is equal to our emotions. This is what women need to regulate. This is what we need to understand. The hormones is not different to emotions. And that is why we're saying, let's get back in tune and in harmony with the cosmic forces of the lunar and the solar forces. Let's learn to wake up with the sunrise before it's dark. Let's finish our dinner. Let's go to bed when it's dark. Let's not have too much of screen time. Let's keep away much from radiation. Let's keep away from too many chemicals, shampoos, detergents, wearing perfumes, wearing makeup. I myself, having had the past background of being in the media, have completely given up any form of chemicals, even if it's for washing utensils, for washing clothes, for washing hands. We've found natural solutions which are easily available today, and the more and more that we are able to respect Mother Nature, the more and more we're going to be able to then have healthier minds and healthier bodies, which we pass on to the next generation. So yeah, I think it's very important to be able to talk about this and say, hey, I'm in seclusion. I need to rest. I need the man in the house or children to take over. I need a friend to come and help him if I'm living all by myself. I need to tell my boss, I'm not showing up. These are my days for resting. And, I think we need to get okay with it. We need to be proud of our identity as women. We need to stand firm and strong in our convictions and then come together as sisters. So then when we bond together is when we are able to support each other and encourage each other instead of pulling the other one and, oh, she's behaving cranky, she's menstruating. She's, that's not the culture that we want to be able to continue anymore. That's not getting us too far, and that's just unhealthy.
Yeah, and even more important when we are thinking about, conceiving a baby, because respecting our menstrual cycles is respecting ourselves, is respecting our true nature. And even more when we are thinking about having a baby, when we were able to balance that part of our cycle of our life, then we'll have even a more balanced uterus to be able to be the home of
Yeah.
a human being.
Yes. And that's the invitation we want to give to a baby who is wanting to be born. And that's the welcome we want to give. Again, in India, we believe that a soul is choosing the mother to incarnate and has chosen the family as well, that these are my ancestors. This is going to be my grandpa. This is the place that I want to live. And through this birth, these are the things that I want to learn in this lifetime and complete the lessons that I couldn't. So anyway, that's a much more deeper spiritual conversation. But having said that, this is the basis for turning things around. And this is the basis for having good prenatal education and understanding of the womb and the wisdom and being in tune with the cosmic cycles.
Mm-hmm.
So very important, so very important. And for men also, for young boys to be sensitized, for them to learn to love and respect their sisters, their girlfriends, their moms, their grandmothers, just working women in their companies. And I think it just would be a whole different balance between the masculine and the feminine, which is what we're struggling with right now.
Yeah, and this would be important subjects to have also in schools and universities, because as you said, during my childhood, the same thing happened. I wasn't highlighted about the importance of women's cycles, and that would help me so much to endure the challenge that I had. But this would be subjects that should be, it's health. It's not just women's health; it's humanity health.
And this brings me down to also the lens through which we see it, just making it into a class of sex education or how women get pregnant and don't impregnate your teenage girlfriend is not the way to go about it. The West at this point is taking pride that they teach their high schoolers things which we may not speak about, because culturally we're kind of, in India especially, I can say that we're disconnected from the way that we would have learned about it, where young teenagers were very openly spoken to, or we see it on temple architecture. When we've grown up in communities where larger families have lived together, we've always heard about it. The aunt is resting, the grandmother would say it in such a way. There would always be a baby being delivered home naturally. So the whole education was not really an intellectual or a formal way. It was more of a living education. It was more of an understood thing. This is how we coexist. This is how we co-inhabit. And, there's a 40-day sacred window period where we don't disturb the newborn and the mama, and she needs time to recover. And then the elder children look after the other children in the house. The duties and responsibilities are divided, and it's done in a very cheerful and a very loving and a very kind way. Like there isn't a commercial aspect. I mean, in our culture, we really never heard of babysitters and nannies, or, we had midwives and we've had doulas, and we've had, as I said, babies were always delivered at home. Like that's something that we really, really need to be able to take pride in. And modern science is really going to have a huge knock on their door when a lot of these ancient wisdoms are decoded, or the sacred texts in India are being able to, somebody can translate it in such a way that then it's looked at through the lens of quantum physics or quantum biology. understanding that everything is energy and everything is done with love and kindness. And we have a lot to speak when somebody from the craniosacral or somebody from the energy field might be able to throw light on how energy works and how there is a connection between the mother and the child for at least 7 to 9 years. And there's no need to also then start rushing into putting children into playgroups and schools and disconnecting, and the mother needs to go back to work. I mean, we need to really culturally just reframe the whole thing. It's a very large conversation. And
You said before that Ayurveda could give a big contribution in terms of balancing our state of life and women's health. Do you wanna talk a little bit more about it, because some people in the audience may not be so acquainted about what Ayurveda really is. And for me, as a yoga teacher, Ayurveda is so much important. And some of my students, women students, told me that one of the things that really helped them to balance their menstrual cycles was also the practice of yoga. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'll try and make it as crisp as possible, because again, Ayurveda is a whole way of life, and the way that I've understood and experienced, somehow the whole, again, I'm having to say that the West has really denigrated the whole education system. And even in India, there's a lot of disconnect in which way that Ayurveda was passed down from generation to generation, from the lineage of the teacher to the disciple. And it's no longer that. It's more about what are the symptoms and how do you treat it. Whereas Ayurveda really is a way of life. So just coming back to the term that I was using earlier, what time you sleep, what time you wake up, having an idea of what suits your body, what were those foods that are, that are indigenous or natural to our biodiversity. What I may be able to eat and digest is not something somebody living in Scandinavian country can eat and digest. And so just understanding that, what were the methods of cooking, what were the ingredients that were being used? And there's so much of distortion that we hear coming in from the West about, oh, you need to eat fermented food, it's good for your gut. And that's one of the things that Ayurveda completely rejects right at the beginning, is you do not eat fermented food. It's extremely bad for the gut. And whatever goes on in your gut is whatever goes on with your entire life. I mean, there's a whole gut psychology syndrome now, which they've proved is also affecting children's learning abilities in school. So we need to understand that we have to shift our idea of where the brain is. The brain really lies in the stomach. And the gut starts from, how you drink water, because of the way that you take in the saliva, which has a lot of healthy and productive bacteria, which has beneficial results when people are able to conserve the pH of their saliva by not drinking and abstaining from foods like tea, coffee, as we said, from chocolates, ice creams, I mean, anything that's processed. So just again, coming back to not only just the lifestyle and the rhythm, but also what kind of food we eat, when we eat, how we cook it. Are we having it warm? Are we enjoying the company? How is my ambience when I'm eating the food? Has it been prepared with love? Has it been freshly harvested, or is it something that has been lying in the refrigerator for weeks?
It's about promoting a way of life that it's away from chemicals, from industry, from processed food, to a more natural methods of living, which we had. And there's sometimes a bit of it's hard for people to understand that natural living, that doesn't mean that it needs to be a hard living. But we even can use technology to help us out, but in the natural methods that can respect and balance nature. Because one of the things that people need to understand is when we respect the natural cycles of nature, we are also respecting ourselves. It's not, Absolutely. We are not away from nature at all.
Absolutely. And that now, you've brought about one of the most beautiful, it's like a golden nugget that I always keep saying. The way that we think, the way that we were educated, has resulted in the way that we look at everything now. Our whole perception is where we are feeling separated from nature. We're feeling apart from the fact that there is a divine connection between the universe and an individual. And that is where we need to really come back to. Yoga is a way, Ayurveda is a way. For somebody, it's maybe meditation. For somebody, maybe it's walking in nature. For somebody, maybe it's being with animals and protecting them.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, there's different approaches. We can all have our GPS system, and I can arrive at the same destination and you can arrive at the same destination, so long as we have the right coordinates on our as you said, on our systems on the internet. So yes, what is more important is to feel that I'm a part of the whole. I'm not separate, I'm not disconnected. And that brings me to, just sort of in conclusion, say that we don't just think for ourselves. Our thinking and our feeling has to become where I think for the whole of humanity versus just for my own selfish gains, which can happen when we come back to living in the indigenous ways.
Yeah. Yukta, I'm going to wrap up with that conclusion, and thank you so much for being with us today. It was such a great talk. We are trying to make it short so that our audience can fully listen to it. Thank you so much again. I know we are going to talk again sooner or later, because there's so many more things that we need to address to our audience.
We continue. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you
Namaste.
so much, Yukta. Have a lovely day. Enjoy.